Hello there, welcome to Code with Ethel. In today's section, we are going to look at the if function, and we'll also take a look at nested ifs, which is using one more than two if functions, and we'll also look at how to use the if function with other functions. So, the if function is one of the functions in Excel, and it's in every programming language we use the if function a lot. So, and each platform has the way the if function can be used, but the concept always remains the same. So, we have to understand the concept of the if function or the if formula, so that in any language that we are going to write, we will know what we are doing. So the if function, this is a function of the if function or the if formula. Use this function to return one value if one condition, if a condition is true, and value if the condition is false. So with the if function, you have a condition, and if that condition is being met, the value that should be returned, which is the value if true, and then the value, another value that will be returned if the condition is not met. So it's like you are asking a kid to go into, or your brother or sister to go into the fridge and get you a milk, or let's say water, and get you water. So if your brother goes and then see milk in the fridge, which is a condition, what should happen? So that becomes the value if true or the value if false. So the condition is go into the fridge and bring me water. So he goes into the fridge and then sees the water. So what should he do with the water? He has to bring the water to you. So go into the fridge and bring me water. So he goes into the fridge and sees water, he brings it, which becomes the value if true. And then also, when he goes and he doesn't see water, maybe he saw milk, what should he do? He shouldn't bring anything, or he should also bring the milk. So that becomes the value if false. The value if false is just if the logical text or the logical or the condition is not true. So every function on its own has their syntax. I mean, the if function, it has this syntax or parameters. Yes, so let me just use parameters. So the if function has three parameters, which is the logical test, which is the same as the condition, the value if true, if the logical test or the condition is true, the value that should be returned. And then it also have the value if false. So if the condition is false, the value that should be returned. So like I said, the logical test become the condition is what you want, you are given. So let's say go into the fridge and bring me water. That becomes the condition or the logical test. So the value if true is if there is water in the fridge, bring it. So that becomes the value if it is true that there is water in the fridge. So the value if false become if there is no water in the fridge, what should be returned? Come empty-handed. So that becomes the value if the condition is false. So that is how we use the if function. That is the psychology, or let me say the concept behind the if function, or the if formula, or the if syntax. So we also use the if function with the equal to, greater, or less than sign. That is what we mostly use the if function with. We use this ones in the logical test section or the condition section. So we have nested if, having more ifs in a single if. So we are going to also look at that. It's a very powerful concept that we need to understand. And then we'll also look at how to combine if with other functions. So we are going to take an example of a scenario. So this is the first aspect of the if function we'll look at, and then I'll give you the second aspect and then the third aspect as well. So this is a school, let's assume this is the school management system, okay? The teacher will be entering the scores here and he wants the grade to appear here. So you agree with me that you are going to have more than four students in a class. There are so many. And you can't be typing 80, let's say a student score 50, you have to type manually A, or let's say C. You have to keep doing that for all 100 students or 60 students, and you have to keep doing that each term. So we are going to see how to use the if function to automate the grading system for a class or for a school. So there are two ways to do this. You can have the scores and then the grade in one sheet in a different cell. As you have the grade and then the scores in a different cells, or you can hard code it. Each of them has their advantage, but we'll try to hard code first. Afterwards, we use the referencing. We refer to the cells for the scores and then the grade. Yes. So for a better understanding, let's start with the hard coding, where you are going to input the grade and then the score into the function for a better understanding. Then afterwards, we'll look at the referencing. So you start with your equal to sign, and then you start typing your formula or your function, which is a if. So it gives you what the function is useful for. Is what it checks whether a condition is met and return one value if the if is true and another value if false. So it gives you a hint of what this particular formula does. That it does it for all of them. It tells you what it does. So first you start typing your formula or your function. If it is that particular one you want, you tap the tab key. So the form functions are always in brackets. Okay, you always type them in bracket, open and close bracket, and you always use comma to separate the parameters. There are some functions you don't need a parameter. These are parameters. You don't need a parameter. There are some too you only need one parameter. Yes. So as time goes on, you will get to understand it. So this is how the if function works. So you start by it's asking you for the logical test. What is the logical test? So if this cell, okay, which is the score side, is equal to 80. So if this student score 80, or there is 80 in this column, exactly 80 in this column, give me an A. Now, anytime you are writing alphabets, anything apart from numbers, you have to put them in quotation sign, like this. You have to put them in quotation sign. You can't do this. It will give you an error. It will assume you want to type a formula. So anytime you are writing an alphabet in a function or in a formula, you put them in a quotation sign, like this, an A. So I'm telling Excel this particular cell, that cell D4, that if so C4 is equal to 80, then give me an A. That is the value if true. So I've separated the logical test, which is the condition that go into the fridge. When you see water, that is a condition. So this is a logical test. You separate with a comma to move to the next parameter, which is the value if true. So if it is true that this cell is 80, then give me an A. Okay. But if this cell is not equal to 80, then give me an E. So it's giving you an E because there's nothing in this cell, and that is a value if false. It's not because it's 0, but because the cell is empty. So that's all. The function comes to this cell and see if there is 80 in it. But since there is no 80, it's giving you the value if false, which is the E. So should there be 80 in this cell? Let's say 80. You see it's giving you exactly A, because you said if cell C4 is equal to 80, not greater than, not less than, but equal to exactly. So if you should put anything aside 80 here, it should give you an E. Even if you should put 79, it should give you an E. 81, it should give you an E. It's always looking for an 80. I hope you are getting it. So what if you want to make it a greater or equal to? So all you need to do is to change the condition. So I'll be like, if, let me clean it and start again. If cell C4 is greater or equal to 80, that is the condition now. I've changed the condition. Give me an A. Else, anything aside 80, so it will be like from 80 and above, give me A. Then from 79 and below, anything below 80 will give you an E. So after writing your formula, you have finished the parameters, the requirement you need to input. You only close it with a bracket and then you press enter. So if this should be 79, it will give you an E. 79.5. Let me see what will happen. It will also give you an E. 79.9 is also an E. But when it is 80, it gives you an E. And if it is 81, it also gives you an A. 100, it also gives you an A. Out of 40, it gives you an E. So that is it with the if function. So with this, we have hard coded the grades or the requirements into Excel, into the function. But the issue with this is that what if the values 80 is no more an A? Let's say it is taken from 90 and above. You would have to come back to formulas what you have done 3 years ago and then change it individually. Okay, so the next thing is we are going to input, we are going to reference. We have already looked at cell referencing. So we are going to reference the cells that contain the grade and then the scores and then the grade. So should there be any change in the requirement or the condition, we just go and then change the cells because we are referring to them. So we'll take a look at it. This is hard coding. So we'll look at the other scenario as well. So in this scenario, we have the scores in a different cell. Not necessarily on the same sheet, but I can use a different sheet for it. But for the purposes of this example, we are using the same cell. So with the referencing, what we are going to do is that it's going to be equal to if this cell is greater or equal to 80, this cell. Okay. Then the value, if it is true, the value if true should be A. This is this cell. And value if false should always be an E. We can also reference this, but let's use it. Let's reference it here. Later on, we'll put an E inside. So that's the value if false. You press enter. So an E. Let's put an E here. So let's assume this is going to be 81. So what we are saying is, Excel should look at C4. If the value is greater or equal to this cell, we are already using cell referencing, then give me this value. So anything aside this should be an E. So when you are done, close the bracket and you press enter. So if you should have this, should be 70, it's going to be an E. Okay, so we are going to use the absolute referencing after once we do the nested if, because you agree with me that this function we need to input all the grades into this so that in case the person score 70 or 60, this should also come. That will be in the nested if. So we are going to use the nested if to incorporate all these scores and then the grade into the function. But before then, what happened is that after typing this, if you come to Eto and you want to type, you have to retype the same thing. But we can't keep doing the same thing throughout. So what we'll do is that we are going to use the absolute referencing, which we did in our previous video. So go back and watch how the absolute referencing is being done. So we are going to hold this cell constant. We are going to hold this cell also constant, and we'll hold this cell constant. So I'm here, but this is going to change. The cell C4, this is always changing because we are going to drag it to come here. This will always be changing. So we are going to hold this constant, constant, and this constant. So that is the absolute referencing. To do that, we are going to press F4 here. We'll come to this, press L4. We'll come to the, and then we press F4. So let's assume, let me put in some figures. So done. I'm using this to drag for all of them. So this is how it is being done. So when you come here, it's always referring to this so that you wouldn't keep typing everything. So when we come to this side, this, and when you come here, it's referring to this. So that is how it is being done using the cell referencing.